Hello and welcome to another video by the Hoylake Computer Club. This is Tom at the club. So in our previous Python video we looked at swap case, we looked at lists and variables and strings, etc. Now to quit out of the REPL, what I failed to actually say was you need to use quit with parentheses and press enter, and then it'll quit out of that REPL. But let's jump onto that and look at more sort of like constructs within Python. So we've talked a little bit about variables. We've talked about the ability to do things with those variables and the fact that they are data structures holding data. And now I'd like to talk about a few other constructs. We have the ability to check if something's true or false. So let's open up our Python REPL and start making a variable. I'll say variable A. Let's use another data structure, a number. I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, no parentheses, just digits. So now have a look at A. It's 1, 2, 3. Now the thing is, if we looked at A and printed it, we see 1, 2, 3. If I now make B equal to a string 1, 2, 3, we can see there's a difference there. But if we print A, oops, let's close that off. We print A, or we print B, we see the same thing when we print it. So without actually kind of knowing that A is an integer or a number and B is a string, they look the same when we print them. So there's another way of looking at that. If we say type and we put a variable in, it will give us a type. Look, A is a class of integer or int, and if we do the same for B, B is a class of str or string. So we can see the different types of data that we have. We've already talked about strings, we've talked about lists, and we've now talked a little bit about integers. Again, integers we can do different things to. So if we do our dir on A, we get a lot of different things we can do. Numerator, real to bytes, conjugate, denominator, from bytes, image, as integer ratio. So those are kind of a few things we can do on that. Now again, I said that we don't normally look at these parts, but with integers, this is where the majority of things happen. If we take a look at add, so double underscore add, based on that we would say something like a double underscore, dot double underscore add double underscore something to it, let's say 12. Now say now we've got 135, which is a different number. We did add, but that's actually aliased as a plus, so that's now calling dot add 12. So we don't use these double underscore methods directly most of the time because they're kind of there for the underlying functionality of other things. So us putting a plus 12 actually invoked a dot add and put the 12 in there for us. So we don't have to write such sort of verbose stuff to get an answer. This is a bit more intuitive. When we think of a plus 12, a being a number and 12 being a number, we add them together. And we can multiply as well. If you notice, if you look through our things, we've got add and bool, blah 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 blah, a load of other stuff. Let's go to, we've got mul, it's half on the screen, mul for multiply. Again, we could technically do a dot underscore underscore mul underscore underscore 2, which would multiply a by 2, gives us 246. Or we could just do a times, and times is an asterisk, shift and 8 usually on most keyboards, 2, which would do the same. So we can utilize these methods by just utilizing shorthand, which is a little bit more intuitive. So this is where those double underscore things come in. We don't always, well, we very rarely actually call them directly. This is why I said to ignore them at the start, because they could confuse things. So in theory, we maybe could do similar things to B. Let's see whether we've got any of those double underscores on B that we can use. Let's do a dir B. Let's see what we can do with some of their double underscores. Oh, we have them all, but it's a string. How does that work? Can we multiply a string number? See what happens. So B is 1, 2, 3. So B times 2. It does something different. What it does is it takes the string and prints it or concatenates so many copies of it. So it literally multiplies that string. So it's like you say, I've got 1 orange, I now have 2 oranges. Same sort of concept. I've got 1 string of 1, 2, 3. Now I've got 2 strings of 1, 2, 3. We'll multiply it by 5. I have 5 strings of 1, 2, 3 stuck together. So it works in a completely different way. This is where you've got to be careful with what data structure you're taking in when you're writing some functionality. If you're writing a mathematical operation and expecting someone to be giving you an integer and you get a string, in Python, if you're doing multiply, you could end up with some really strange output that really makes no sense whatsoever. So always be mindful of your types. Right, so we've established we can do that. Now if we do plus, let's see what it does with plus. Like add B plus 2. We can't do that. You can only concatenate string. Notice the word concatenate here. So now instead of adding 2 numbers together, this concatenates or sticks together 2 strings. So if I said B plus ABC, it works. We've got 1, 2, 3 ABC. It doesn't do a mathematical operation, it concatenates. So basically you're concatenating 1, 2, 3 and ABC together. With a multiply, you're concatenating however many copies of 1, 2, 3, or whatever the left side is, by the number on the right side. So you're just doing concatenation operations instead of actual mathematical operations. So there's a difference. This kind of leads me to we could literally make some functionality now. So for functionality, I'm not going to work in the REPL because it's going to be a little bit confusing trying to write multi-line things on a single line thing. So we're going to quit out of this using quit and parentheses, which will get us back to the operating system. Now we're going to use something called Vim, which is a text editor. So let's type in Vim space, let's say app.py. I'm just giving it a name. It's a file name of app.py, and Python files to store multiple Python commands end in .py. Okay, so we've now got an actual thing. Now to type, you can't just type. If I'm typing, well, if I'm typing in general, you can't just type. So if you want to actually type some stuff in Vim, you use I to turn it into insert mode. Now it's acting like what you'd think of as a notepad or a text editor. So here what we're going to do is we're going to write a sequence of commands. So I'll say A is equal to 10, B is equal to 20, okay, and C is equal to A plus B. So we've just done 3 different commands. In REPL that would actually just run them. This is kind of like stacking them up ready to run. Okay, so we've now done that. Now if we print A, then we print B, then we print C, we should be able to see what data has been set to them. So now, to save something, we press escape to get out of insert mode, colon, W is to write the file, Q is to quit out of the editor. So now if I use ls to list what's in my directory, we have app.py. So to run app.py, we just say python space app.py, and it runs the code inside that text editor or inside that file. So we've got a 10, which was A, a 20, which was B, and a 30, which is C, which was A plus B. So let's jump back on into Vim and go back into insert mode with I. So what I also now want to do, I want to kind of turn this into functionality where I can just take two numbers and return back what the answer is to that mathematics. So we can use what we call functions. So a function in Python is defined. So we need to use the def keyword, space, and the name of the functionality. I'm going to say my underscore add. Here we need to give it some parentheses and a colon. This is saying I am a new block of code. If I press enter, notice how it's indented the next line. All blocks in Python are indented. So we know where the scope of something is. So basically anything indented under here is actually part of the myAdd function. So if I said return, that's going to return something back to somebody who uses the myAdd. I'm going to say return A plus B. Okay. Now we need to call the myAdd function in some way. So we're going to say x is equal to myAdd, and that's going to call the myAdd and return. So in other words, spit some data out, and we're going to set it to x. Then we're going to print x. So let's save this with an escape to get out of the insert mode, colon, WQ to write and quit. Now let's do python app.py, and we get 10, 20, 30, but then we get 30 again, which is x. So it's just done the add again. So our functionality, we call that function multiple times. Let's edit that again. I'm going quite quickly, but feel free to kind of pause when you need to. Now, we can take in what we call arguments. So if I go back into insert mode, I'm going to type, let's say, num1, comma, oops, I'm not going to type it there, num1, comma, num2. So now we've got two variables. So what I'll say is num1 plus num2. So now whenever we call myAdd, we have to pass it two numbers. If I pass it a number 100, comma 2, it's going to take number 1, add number 2 to it, which will make it 102, and then return that data. So when I print x next time, so let's escape to get out of insert mode, colon WQ to write and quit. Now I'm going to run python app.py, and I say now x is 102. So our functionality now has changed. We now got a more variable way of calling that functionality. So we can just pass it two numbers and it will add them together. And that's a function in Python. Let's take another look at it in Vim. So we have the def keyword to define a function. We then have some sort of a label or name for that function. We have some parentheses with some possible arguments that are taken into that function. We then have a colon to denote that we're starting a block. Anything inside that block is tabbed in or moved inwards in some way or indented. And at this point we're just returning some data back. We're saying num1 plus num2, just return that back. So that's a function. Now there's so many different complexities that we can add to this. We can add more lines of code to a function. We can reuse that function over and over and over again to do different things. So that was pretty much functions. So I think we've had enough time for another section. I don't want to kind of bombard you with too much at a time. Feel free to go over this as many times as you need to understand the things. Feel free to leave comments as well, asking questions if there's any confusion over things, or if you've got any actual questions to clarify your understanding. Again, if you like the video, feel free to hit that like button, give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy the content, feel free to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to get notifications. It's been great doing this. Have a great day. I'll see you again.